Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, welcome. I just wanted to open up the room to allow everyone a few moments to join us. We will be getting started promptly at 2 p.m., and we are looking forward to a fantastic webinar. So we're going to let the first few folks trickle in here, and we're going to get started in about 60 seconds. Oh, not 60 seconds, in about 120 seconds. All right. Thank you so much. Welcome, welcome. I'm seeing more and more people trickle in to the new folks. I just want to say that we will be starting promptly at 2 p.m. Eastern. Thank you all so much for joining a couple minutes early. Thank you. We're getting started in just a few more minutes, or not even a few, in just a couple of minutes here. All right, everyone, we're about 60 seconds away. I see we still have a few more people trickling in. I just wanted to say thank you all so much for joining. We're in the last 60 seconds here, and like I said, we're going to be starting promptly at 2 p.m. Eastern. All right, welcome in, everyone. All right, and so I think it's about time for us to get it started here. So I just want to say thank you all so much for joining our 2023 Business Impact Report pre-release webinar. I'm Timothy Walden, the communications leader for the Identity Theft Resource Center, and this particular webinar will be led by our very own James E. Lee, who is the Chief Operating Officer for the ITRC. But I'll let him conduct his own introduction, and here's James.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us today when we go over the findings of the 2023 Business Impact Report here at the Identity Theft Resource Center. I'm James Lee. I am the COO of the ITRC. For those of you who are not familiar with us, we're an almost 25-year-old nonprofit, and our core business, if you will, is the free assistance given to victims of identity crimes. That's where we started, and it remains a core of what we do. But over time, we've also begun to branch into other kinds of identity-related issues, including researching trends around identity crimes and the impacts of those have on both individuals and on businesses. This report is a companion to one we released a couple of months ago on consumer impacts. Today, we're going to talk about the impacts specifically on small businesses when it comes to cyber attacks, data breaches, or both. So just a quick readout of what we found. You can get more details by downloading a report at idtheftcenter.org/publications. But here's an overview of what we found in this report. That attacks against small businesses are up. But at the same time, confidence among small business leaders about their ability to repel those attacks and respond to those attacks has gone up even higher. We also found that cyber insurance is now the #1 source of funds to recover from an attack. That's very different than when we published our first report 3 years ago, when cyber insurance proceeds were a very low source of recovery funds. Non-financial impacts are up more than financial impacts. It's not to say there aren't financial impacts, but that there are other secondary impacts that are now coming up to cause problems for businesses as they attempt to recover from an attack. All of these trends are a reflection of broader trends that apply to all businesses. That is, more attacks. Because there's more attacks, there's more breaches. And in particular, more supply chain vendors being targeted. And since most small businesses oftentimes are part of a supply chain, they are naturally going to be targeted more often, and you're going to see more data breaches as a result. And then the final finding, which we'll talk about, is small businesses have been very slow to adopt new data protection and privacy tools that could both help the business, but also their customers. And we'll talk about that here in a moment. So let's go back to 2021 when we published our first business impact report. And what we saw then was a little over 50% of businesses, small businesses, were the victim of either a data breach, a security breach, or both. And we're using the definition of small business that the Small Business Administration uses, which is 500 or fewer employees. Let's fast forward to today. So in this report from 2023, we see a much higher number of both data breaches, security breaches, and a combination of both. So if we were a little over 50% 2 years ago, we're almost 3/4 of businesses now saying they've had one part of this, a data breach, a security breach, or both. So big move in a relatively short period of time. What we've also seen here is the number of first-time attacks is fairly consistent across the years. But what we're seeing is an escalation in the number of repeat attacks. So organizations that have been attacked more than once is actually outpacing the number of first-time victims, companies being victims. So here you'll see 43% first time in the last 12 months, but you see much higher rates of people who have had 2 times, 3 times, 4 or more times in the last 12 months would be how many times they've been attacked. What's causing all of this? Fairly consistent, though we've seen some growth. Consistency in the sense that external attackers, threat actors, are still the #1 source of an attack. That has been consistent throughout the 3 years we've been doing this report. Malicious insiders, sort of consistent year over year. In this case, 30% of attacks were some way linked to a malicious insider. Could be an employee, could be a vendor. What we did see was a drop in the number of third-party vendors and from last year. And that is largely attributable to the fact that very small businesses don't have very many vendors. So the organization themselves may be a vendor to a larger organization, but they don't have very many in their supply chain. And we did see a pretty good drop in the percentage point drop year over year in third-party vendors. And remote workers, also, we see that consistently in large organizations as well as small organizations, that continue to drop as more people go back to work, but also the security for remote workers continues to improve. Where we saw increases was in the number of phishing schemes causing particularly data breaches and some form of identity scam or fraud where they're able to entice an employee to give information that can then be used to facilitate an attack against the business. So phishing schemes and then some sort of scam or fraud. Did grow last year. The impacts of these attacks, obviously, there's going to be a financial impact whenever you have an attack against an organization that is successful. What we've seen, though, is the amount of the impact grow in one category. So you have more organizations falling into this category of $250,000 or less in terms of a loss. And that has grown as a category, but that's actually in a perverse sort of way, that's a little bit of good news, because that means there are not as many organizations losing money greater than that. That can still be a tremendous amount of money to lose if you're a small business. So $250,000 or even $50,000, even $1,000 can be a major impact to a small business. But we do see the growth in that category of loss as opposed to the higher end. When it comes to consumers, you're seeing growth at the higher end. So individuals are losing more money, whereas small businesses, it is now kind of concentrating at the lower end of the scale. How do they recover once there is an attack? If we were looking at this chart a couple of years ago, it looked very different. A lot of organizations had to take out loans. They had to tap into an existing line of credits. There was a much more focus on expense reduction and headcount reduction to weather the crisis that comes with a data breach or a security breach. Here, though, we're now seeing cyber insurance proceeds jump to the top. So more organizations taking out cyber insurance and using those proceeds to recover in the event of a data breach or a cyber attack or both. Cash reserves still remain a number two, and that's still a high number. Still organizations are tapping that line of credit, but at lower rates. New loans is a much lower rate. The one area where you are seeing a little bit of an uptick year over year is headcount reductions. So we saw a high point of 15% in 2021. We dropped down in 2022. Now we're back up to 13% here in 2023, where people are cutting jobs to be able to help recover financially from an attack. But that is not the only problem that comes with some form of a cyber attack, whether it's a data breach or a security breach or both. And what we're seeing, obviously, is, again, a loss of revenue is the number one problem. That's pretty consistent percentage-wise year over year. A little bit lower this year, not significantly, but a little bit lower loss of revenue. But you're seeing significant increase in these secondary kinds of impacts, which in many respects are harder to recover from, and they can be long-term, have an even bigger impact than what can be a relatively momentary loss of revenue. So what you're particularly seeing is difficulty in understanding what happened and why. Now that may be a result of the fact that small businesses don't have access to sophisticated cybersecurity and forensic tools. So they're struggling to figure out what happened and why, which also means they're having difficulty. You'll see down a little bit lower, difficulty finding a solution, and certainly an affordable solution. So after revenue loss, this difficulty in understanding what happened and why is a significant finding. You're seeing increases in regrettable employee turnover. So you're seeing employees leaving companies that have data breaches now at a higher rate, almost a third. That's a significant increase. The same thing with loss of customer trust. We've always seen that number, but this number is higher than it has been historically. So those three things together, not knowing what happened and why, having employee turnover, and then losing customer trust, those can be long-term issues that can become a drag on the business. So it's important that these issues be addressed. One last thing is you do see, as more organizations are using cyber insurance, we're for the first time seeing in double digits a difficulty obtaining cyber insurance. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. That the cyber market is in a lot of flux. There's a lot of volatility and a lot of complexity in that market, as the insurance carriers themselves try to figure out how to adequately assess the risk and price the risk of an organization when it comes to cyber issues. So we can sort of expect to see this number kind of bounce around, most likely for a while longer. We asked folks, how about your ability to respond to a cyber attack? So all these previous numbers are all against this backdrop of we've seen the highest number of attacks since we started conducting this research 3 years ago. So we're, 73% of organizations said they had a breach of a data breach, a security breach, or both. Let's contrast that with what we're seeing here. Last year, there was very high confidence rate that people could address a cyber attack. This year, it's even higher. So 85% of the respondents said that they were prepared to respond to a cyber attack, a data breach, or both, and that they were ready to recover from those. So it is interesting to see that there is that high level of confidence. There is some evidence to suggest they're absolutely correct. And when you look at the fact that the dollar value losses are dropping and you're a little bit static on the loss of revenue, slightly down. So from a financial perspective, they may very well be better prepared, but that's still an extraordinarily high rate of confidence. And as long as businesses are taking these threats seriously, and they are indeed planning on how to address them, then high confidence is maybe warranted, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. But what we don't want to see is this slip into overconfidence, and then organizations wind up being hurt far more than they would if they took a much stronger posture in protecting themselves. We talked about with the respondents to the survey about some of the newer things that can be used to protect their business as well as their customers. And that's in contrast to, we had already asked questions, and you can read it in the full report, around what do they do in terms of training, what are they doing in terms of cybersecurity tools, what are they doing in terms of the more traditional approaches to data protection and data security and privacy. So with what we thought we would do is focus in this survey more around what are some of the things that are just coming into the market or have been in for a couple of years and are established. Are they taking advantage of them? And what you see here is basically you have a cadre of small businesses who are taking advantage of some of the newer techniques that can be very effective at protecting an organization and its data and its customers. But the vast majority of organizations are not yet looking at these things, or not implementing these things. So whether you're talking about multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication within an organization, just employees using it inside the house, you've still got just right at a third. You have less than a third, only a little over a quarter if you're talking about for an external use. I'm sorry, I actually reversed those numbers. It's the other way around. So external use is a little over a third. Internal use is just a little over a quarter. So those are two very effective means of preventing, in particular, if a credential is compromised, which we know threat actors want credentials, and we know that those have led to some significant data breaches this year. The MoveIt data breach, which was a supply chain attack in particular, was because of compromised credentials. So if you had two-factor authentication, that kind of attack can be blocked. We're not seeing level of role-based accessibility. So what kind of access you have to data and software and process is being determined by what you do. What's your role in an organization? We'd only seeing a little over a quarter applying that kind of a process. And that's a very simple tool to do. Long passwords, something as simple as just having longer passwords, because we know longer passwords are more difficult to compromise. Still, only a little over a quarter of organizations saying that they use and they force the use of a minimum of 12 character passwords. Here's one that's newer, and it gets to the point of you can't breach information if you don't have it, right? So what are you doing in terms of data minimization? And when I say that, what I mean is, are you collecting more information than you need? So particularly marketers are very interested in capturing all the information that they can, because they want to be able to find customers who are looking for their product. And they don't want to waste their time talking to people who aren't interested in their product. They don't want to waste the prospect's time by pitching to people who aren't going to be interested. So we tend to over collect data, and then we hold on to it too long. So data minimization is all based on the concept of only collect what you need, only keep it as long as you need it. So as soon as the transaction is complete, for example, get rid of the information. And if you're required to keep something, make sure that it is secure and encrypted. So that way, you don't have to worry about excess amounts of information being exposed. If you do have a cyber attack, you do have a data breach, you've kept the minimum amount of information required. And that is both protects your business and it protects the individuals whose information is compromised. You can see the rest of the numbers there. I do want to point out passkeys, which are relatively new, but we've had a lot of movement here just in the last 6 weeks, even with Google announcing that they're going to make that default on Google properties. You've had Amazon saying that they're going to make passkeys default. The infrastructure is in place now because all of the major manufacturers, Microsoft, Apple, Google, they've all adopted passkey. The infrastructure to use passkeys, it now exists on the infrastructure side. What has to happen now to drive adoption is individual organizations, businesses have to now configure their systems to be able to receive the passkey. And remember, a passkey replaces a password. So rather than relying on an individual to know or to create a password and then enter that password, even with a two-factor authentication or something, they have to remember that password. And that is a very risky proposition, as we know, because credentials can get compromised pretty easily. Individuals can give them up thinking they're talking to a legitimate representative of a company when in fact they're not. With a passkey, none of that happens. It's device-based. The token is in the device. The individual does not know the token. They don't know the information, so they can't give it away. And it's a system-to-system process. So the ability to fish someone out of their credential so they can get into a system becomes a moot point because the individual doesn't know whatever the credential is. Passkeys over time, we do believe, will become a very large part of the authentication process. We'll never completely do away with passwords, but passkeys could become the dominant. But it's going to require now small businesses, medium businesses, large businesses to change their account setup and their websites and all their account access processes to be able to accept passkeys. We did talk about data minimization. There are some other data privacy best practices that can help, but here again, we're not seeing great utilization in small businesses. The highest level of utilization is allowing consumers to opt out or limit information that's collected about them. And that's at 37%. So just a little over a third of small businesses are doing that. And it's we're going to have to do some more research to dig into these numbers a little bit, because some of this may very well be because these that companies that responded are in states that have passed comprehensive state privacy laws that require consumer access. But overall, this still shows it's roughly anywhere between a quarter to a little over a third of organizations are adopting these practices, which means the reverse is true. The vast majority of small businesses are not following data privacy practices that could be helpful to them and also to their customers. So whether that is giving customers access to information, allow them to correct it, allow them to delete it, allow them to limit the collection of use, all these things can be helpful in protecting an individual's privacy, which in the long run helps the business as well. So the question we always get, well, why? All these trends we just talked about, all these outcomes we just talked about, why? So the why in this particular case, we believe, is we've had a number of things happen this year. One is we had a lot of cybercrime groups that have been out of the marketplace, if you will, because of the war in Ukraine last year, have come back onto the playing field for committing identity crimes. And they're joining the groups that sprung up in their absence. So we've got both the old cybercrime groups and new cybercrime groups all now in the attacking businesses of all sizes, but there are groups that focus on small businesses. And as we've seen from the numbers, small businesses have been attacked more frequently this year, and there's nothing to suggest that that's going to change. We've also seen a resurgence of ransomware. That's kind of related to these first two bullet points, but ransomware is way up. Zero-day attacks, which are software flaws that are not patched and previously unknown, those are way up. And small businesses can be very vulnerable to those kinds of attacks because they're completely reliant on the manufacturer of the software they use providing them with a patch. And so if the manufacturer of that software doesn't know there's a flaw and the bad guys find it, that makes the small businesses vulnerable to attack before they even know how to fix it. So zero-day attacks are way up this year, just order of magnitude. We recorded 5 data breaches as a result of a zero-day attack last year. We've already reported 86 so far this year in 2023, and the year, of course, is not over. And then lastly, this is going to be a record-breaking year for data breaches. We broke the previous record for data breaches about 2 months ago. That was the annual number of breaches was 1,862 at the end of 2021. We're going to be well over that. We already are. We'll probably end the year somewhere between 2,500 and 3,000 data breaches for the year. So just order of magnitude, a lot of those are small businesses, in particular supply chain attacks, because small businesses make up a huge part of the supply chain, and there have been some massive supply chain attacks this year, and the year is not over. So along with why, then the next question is, what do we do? Well, the things we recommend small businesses do, first and foremost, is follow basic cybersecurity best practices. Keep your software up to date, both the operating software in terms of versions. Make sure you always have the latest version of your software, because that is always going to be the most secure, and it is more often than not also the most efficient. So make sure you keep your software up to date from just a version perspective, but also whenever you do get a security patch delivered by your software provider, make sure those are put in place immediately. Use that auto update feature that comes in most every off-the-shelf piece of software. So make sure you're keeping your software up to date. Hire a cybersecurity expert if you don't already have one. You can use a third party, a managed security service provider to advise you or to do provide your security for you. You may already have an infrastructure, an IT infrastructure advisor. See if they can also advise you on cybersecurity. Have somebody who can help you maintain a good cybersecurity posture, because your business most likely has nothing to do with cybersecurity. So you need an expert to help make sure you keep your business safe. And the best way to do that is to hire an outside consultant until you grow to the point where you can have somebody on staff. And then the last part under this basic cybersecurity is, train your people. And it's not just a one and done. You can't do it just their first day on the job and then you never talk about cybersecurity and data protection and how to avoid phishing. Those should be conversations you have on a regular basis, because they're always changing. The way the business the criminals attack, I always say that they're a crafty lot, because they're always finding new ways of infiltrating businesses, either by scamming employees, some sort of new fraud, or some type of technical attack. So train your team to be able to spot that and resist those kinds of attacks. Look at those new protections that are available. Add multi-factor authentication if you haven't. Add passkeys if you can. Look at the best practices around data privacy. Make sure you're not collecting information you don't need. Make sure you don't keep it if you don't have to, and if you do have to keep it, secure it. So you're doing everything you can to keep your business safe and also your customers safe, which in the long run obviously is going to be helpful to you and your business and your customers. That's the 2023 Business Impact Report from the ITRC. We certainly hope you found this information informative. There's a lot more information in the actual report, which you can download at idtheftcenter.org/publications. And once you've read it, if you have questions, or if you have questions now, send us an email. We'll be happy to respond to them. The email address is on the screen, communications@idtheftcenter.org. Again, thank you for your time, and we look forward to meeting with you again in the future.
Thank you so much, everyone. We will be sending out a recording as soon as we can. Have a fantastic day.